Okay, let's get started. Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for coming to our session on global anti-corruption and effectively managing risk. We'll start with some introductions, myself and our panelists, and then go into a couple of questions, and then leave some time for questions from the audience. So my name is Steve Bach. I work for Kroll. I work specifically in our compliance division, and we have a team of about 200 people across the globe supporting both corporates and financials, third-party risk, M&A, and other due diligence efforts.
My name is Tom Kendris. I'm the president of Novartis Corporation in the U.S. I'm also the head of legal for Novartis in the U.S. I've been with Novartis, which is a pharmaceutical company, since 1995 when it was Ciba-Geigy. It merged with Sandoz, and we created Novartis. I oversee, in the president's role, all of the Novartis businesses in the U.S., so there are a few of them, pharmaceuticals being one, generics being another, Alcon, our eye care company, being another. And I am not a compliance professional. I say that up front, but I work very closely with all of our compliance professionals, and legal and compliance at Novartis are very close working groups.
My name is Anne Marie Wick, and I'm with Briggs and Stratton Corporation, and I'm going to apologize up front that I am under the weather, so hopefully you can hear me. If those in the back, raise your hand if I'm not clear at any point in time. So I apologize for that. Briggs and Stratton Corporation is in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and as I went down the streets yesterday afternoon, I was glad to see that our engines were hard at work clearing out the sidewalks. For those maybe not as familiar with our product, we are the world's largest producer of small engines that is primarily used in snow throwers, lawnmowers, pressure washers, and the like. And then we also produce our own products of snow throwers, lawnmowers. And we've extended our product line more into generators and job sites. So when you see construction in the light towers and heating units so people can work 24/7, we also make those. I might be a little bit different from many people who are not only on this panel but also at the conference. I'm not an attorney by background. I'm a CPA. But I was hired by Briggs and Stratton to develop our anti-bribery and anti-corruption program from scratch. Not so much that because we had any issues, but because we are continually expanding globally, and the senior leaders said it's about time that we have something in-house. My previous employer was Johnson Controls in Milwaukee, and I was hired when we were under a deferred prosecution agreement, so I worked side by side with a monitor during that 3-year period. So have a lot of war wounds accordingly, but I learned a lot in that process. And then now shifting over where I'm creating something from scratch is a fun environment as well.
I'm Sonny Ellis. I'm the general counsel for Parsons Corporation. We're a large design, engineering, construction firm, primarily large infrastructure projects, so roads, bridges, tunnels, wastewater treatment plants, things of that sort. Also very heavily involved in the cybersecurity area. I've been with Parsons about 11 years or so. Parsons has 6 core values, integrity being one of those. Each of the core values has an executive sponsor, essentially, for the core value, and I'm that for our integrity core value. So.
Great. Okay. Thank you. 3 different industries represented here. I'll start the conversation with a question. Can each of you tell us about how your company proactively identifies and mitigates risk exposure as an integral part of your normal decision-making? Tom, perhaps we can start with you.
Sure, Steve. Compliance at Novartis is clearly important, but for us, making everything that we do every day, all of our business decisions, making them with not only high performance in mind but integrity in mind is really a key for us. You know, we are a company that is based on innovation. We're a pharmaceutical company. We develop drugs for diseases that haven't been cured yet, for patients that have needs that haven't been met yet. And if we have compliance issues, and I noted down Anne-Marie's war wounds comment, I have many war wounds. from litigation and investigations. And if we have those kinds of things, we're distracted from our mission of helping patients and developing new medicines for patients. So if we don't get compliance right, then our mission of innovation is just not going to be met. And for us, we've had kind of a transformation. It's no longer enough for us to do what's legal and what's going to get us good business results. We have people, all of our stakeholders, including our patients, but also investors, analysts, the government. We have people asking, how do we do business? They want to know how we're doing business, and they want to know whether or not we're doing business with integrity. So in order to do that, we have to do exactly what this question is asking. We have to anticipate risk. We have to look for ways to mitigate risk in advance. We have to prevent cases that become litigations that I handle as a lawyer. We have to prevent those cases from happening in the first place. And you know, Novartis is a huge company. We distribute around the world in 155 countries. We have 118,000 employees. And obviously, anti-bribery and corruption is really important to us. One of the ways that we do that we handle compliance is from a top-down approach, and also from a bottoms-up approach. So we have a tone from the top from our CEO, from our board, from our chairman. Joe Jimenez is our CEO, and he is always talking about compliance issues and integrity and ethics and compliance issues. On the other side of that, we have a compliance program that's led by Shannon Klinger, who's actually was supposed to be here today. I'm actually subbing for her. She was in Basel, Switzerland, our global headquarters, at a board meeting today. Shannon is our Chief Ethics and Compliance Officer, and she is on the executive committee of Novartis, and she reports directly to Joe Jimenez. And she's established an integrated compliance program. So what do I mean by that? It's integrated with our business. Our compliance program works hand in hand, not only with legal, finance, and audit and groups like that, but also with our commercial business. We think it's important for our compliance team and our legal team to be involved in decisions, commercial decisions, business decisions early on, so we can get it right from a compliance perspective. So, for example, if a marketing program is being developed by our marketing colleagues, one way to do that, maybe the old way of doing that, was that the marketing people would work on it, they would develop it, they would talk to a public relations firm, they would talk to a marketing consultant, they would develop it, and then at some point they would present it to management, and then they would present it to legal and compliance. We think that that is not optimal, and what we do is, as I said, we try and integrate legal and compliance from the beginning, early on, during the conception stage of such programs. In that way, we think we can develop programs that not only are going to be successful from a business perspective, but they'll also be the right programs, will do it right from an integrity, ethics, and compliance perspective. So, you know, in terms of proactively identifying risk, that collaborative approach, compliance, working with the business, to look at programs and strategies from the start, that's really important to us. And from my perspective as the general counsel, instead of dealing with problems after the fact, like litigation or investigations, we can prevent them before they even occur.
Great, thank you. Anne Marie or
Yeah,
Sunny?
I'll add just a few comments. The size of Briggs and Stratton is going to be smaller. We've got just under 7,000 employees worldwide, but we do distribute our products over 100 different countries. So we rely a lot on our distributors and our dealers around the world. So going into identifying and mitigating risk exposure, and I'm speaking to the choir here, but you got to understand your business. You know, how do you go to market, and how do you define the risk in whatever region or whatever product line? I mentioned that we acquired a company that does light towers and heating units. Well, those units are sold into oil and gas, construction, and mining. And no offense, if you add the transportation company to it, you've now have the 4 highest corrupt industries in the world. And no offense to anyone who's in those industries, but you know it, right? So I ended up spending 3/4 of my time on that acquisition for the first 18 months that we had the company. And so it's identifying those risks. We identified that in the M&A process, but then identifying how are you going to have to shift where you put your emphasis accordingly. So the first and foremost is know your business, know how you go to market. A couple things that we do specifically within Briggs and Stratton is that I actually sit in on our senior VP's meetings weekly that he has with his supply chain group, his sales group, his production group, and his marketing group, so that I understand what are their next steps. Not that I hear it after the fact, but where are they going to market? What are new products that they're bringing on board? What are new distributors? Now, I'm going to know about the distributors way early on, but it helps me help them guide them and navigate through that risk versus the, oops, we should have contacted Anne-Marie a little bit earlier. I am on those weekly meetings, and I have an agenda item each time to talk about hot topics that they need to be aware of so that they can be proactive in their own accord. And it's not only me that's talking about the compliance and ethics, and particularly related to anti-bribery and anti-corruption. And now, because of that, I used to focus a lot with the sales folks, right? There's a risk there. They're bringing on the distributors, and we need to know with whom we're going to market. But now it's the marketing folks who are coming to me almost more often when they're building promotions in any of our areas of the business. Anne-Marie, can we do this in this marketplace? Let's talk ahead of time before we start working with these third parties and developing these promotions. Is this appropriate, and does this follow our code, and does it follow the law? So it's being proactive and working with the business and not sitting in your office and waiting for them to come to you, because they're not going to unless you start. They mentioned earlier this morning, telling the stories and talking about and identifying what those risks are. And the last brief thing that I wanted to bring up is, I'm sure at many of your companies you have various integrity committees or anti-bribery, anti-corruption committees, and we do the same. We have an integrity steering committee and a program committee. The steering committee is comprised of every location, where we have a location, every functional area in the organization, and there's about 24 of us, and we meet quarterly. And the process of that is to build feedback up from the rank and files, and then also push information down. Because the information just coming from me, I'm a department of 2 plus 2 interns. Okay, not a huge department. It's about the right size for the size of our company, but it's not huge. So I rely on that steering committee to speak to marketing and R&D and finance and whomever, that they're the boots on the ground helping us communicate that message. It's because coming from me, that's one thing. Coming from them is a whole nother messaging and a way to connect with the rank and file around the world.
Just building a little bit on the theme of early involvement, I often refer people to the old Fram oil filter commercial, and I don't know if you remember that many, many years ago, but there's a mechanic standing in the commercial, and he's got a car behind him that they're lifting the engine out of, and he's standing there with an oil filter talking about the benefits of the oil filter. And he says, you can pay me now, pointing to the oil filter, or you can pay me later, pointing to them pulling the engine out of the car. And that's what I tell our folks a lot. Look, you're going to need our involvement. It's much, much better for you and for the company. If you get us involved early, we can help you navigate issues before they really become issues, and it's going to work out a lot smoother for you. Because we're a project and service-based company, we don't have distributors, we don't have products to sell, but we do, the kinds of projects that we do are too big really for one company to do it. So we work a lot with joint venture partners and subcontractors. And that's where our focus, at least internationally on the risk side, really is focused. Virtually every project before we bid it goes through a project review, and it goes through a technical review. It's the kind of things that I'm always amazed. I'm not an engineer, and the things that engineers can do just startle me all the time. So it'll go through a technical review, of course. It'll go through a financial review. Are we going to get paid? are the subcontractors that we've got able to do the work, and they have the financial wherewithal to do it. But we also do a reputational review of the partners that we are working with. So we have a questionnaire that goes out to a joint venture partner or to a subcontractor that they have to fill out. They give us information about whether or not they've got a code of conduct, whether or not they do training for their employees, how often that they do it, those kinds of things. We also do our own due diligence, just internet searches, and sometimes depending upon the geography or the particular partner involved, we might involve a third party to help us do a little more intensive research on the joint venture partner or the subcontractor. And at every one of these project reviews that comes up, that's going to be a question that's going to ask. I will always ask you know, usually they will include the results of those reviews in the documents that we're reviewing on the project review. But if I don't see them, I will ask, have you done it? Send it to me. I want to look at it. Is the lawyer that's involved with your business unit, have they seen it? Have they passed on it? And there have been times where we have decided not to work with a subcontractor or a joint venture partner because of those issues. Usually we're able to find someone else to work with, but sometimes there have been at least a couple of occasions where we've just decided to not to pursue the project. We do the same sort of things with agents and business consultants. Those include face-to-face meetings with those consultants. When I first started at Parsons, we were renewing an agency agreement with an agent we had in Israel that had been done before my time, and the agent had gotten a new lawyer, and we got comments back from the lawyer about the anti-corruption section that we had in the agreement, and they wanted it removed. And we'll say, well, no, we're not going to remove it. And oh, by the way, it's been in the agreement and it's been renewed for 2 or 3 times. Well, it turns out that the agent didn't really realize it was there. So that was a clear indication that we needed to do more than just put these things in our agreements and have people sign them. So we do face-to-face meetings with every agent or business consultant that we sign. We give them in advance a copy of our anti-corruption manual and of our policies and procedures. We sit down, we talk to them about it, we go through it with them, we give them an opportunity to ask questions about it, and then we have them sign something in addition to the agency agreement that's got all of that language in it, to sign something saying, yes, they've had the meeting with us, they understand it, they have not engaged in any corrupt practices in helping us pursue projects, and they agree not to do it in the future. The Parsons executive that had the meeting with them will write up his own minutes of that meeting, and we do that every year. And then we should do it every year. We don't do it quite every year, but maybe at least every other year we will do in-person anti-corruption training for the agents and for any of their staff that's working on our projects. So.
Great, thanks. So you've each heard from experts in 3 different industries. One of the questions I want to pose, building on what you said, is building on what was said earlier today about tone from the top and you working across the senior leadership, is I think everyone probably has a challenge of, as you've said, a couple of you said, being early in the game, and Sonny used the Fram oil filter example, which I think is an excellent one. Do you come to the table with your leadership or to your organization with any data or analytics, or how do you get over the sell of you really need to do this in advance of something happening?
If I could start on that. Someone earlier this morning had they send out something they call "Don't Let This Happen to You," which is great. I'm going to ask him if I can steal that from a branding standpoint. But I find that very effective. I send out periodically to our executive leadership team, which is comprised of our senior executives, the presidents of all our business units, all of our business development people, updates on particular corruption issues that have come to light that I think are situations that our folks could find themselves in as well. And a lot of it is essentially this, there but for the grace of God, go I. I'll describe what happened. I'll describe what the penalties were often far in excess of any profits that they may have made from their illegal schemes, and sometimes jail time for people as well. And describe how these kinds of things could crop up at Parsons, and how we should go about addressing them before they happen. But I think I found that that's been a very effective way to get people to realize that there are serious consequences for this. Not only consequences for the company, but consequences for them personally. You know, when the FCPA was first passed, nobody went to jail. And the fines were relatively small. Over the last 10, 15 years or so now, they're starting to pursue individuals as well as companies, and people are going to jail, and that certainly gets your attention.
I guess I would, remember, I'm a CPA, so I love data, right? I mean, I live for the numbers. But I don't need to use the data to sell the anti-bribery and corruption program and our ethics program. I've got plenty of examples and headlines every day to send out, and they are even coming to me saying, how do we avoid this? For me, the data is part of the risk analysis and identifying the red flags before they happen, or as a predictor of what is happening. So I don't want to claim that Briggs and Stratton is on the top tier of this, because we're working on it, okay? But I know where it works well, because I've done it in the past in my career, is that data mining. And for those of you who are not accountants and not in the finance group, get to know the accountants and the finance groups, or encourage when you have an open hire in your compliance department, hire a CFE, a certified fraud examiner, hire a CPA that can do that monitoring for you, that data analytics. I am very fortunate that in the organization where I work, we have one instance of SAP, and that is a gold mine of gaining data and doing a data dump. Of where you're selling your items, who have profit margins skewed accordingly. All right, what is that triggering? When I was at Johnson Controls, and excuse my French on this, I would say if you made your numbers, particularly in a tough economy, I'd say, why? They said, that's funny, I thought everyone was supposed to be congratulating me. I'm like, I want to know how you made your numbers in such a tough economy. And they'd look at me, and excuse my French, they'd say, damned if I do, damned if I don't. I make my numbers and everyone's happy, but then here you come along and say, how in the world did you do it in such a tough economy? You have to be able to look at it on both sides of the equation. So if you don't already have someone, or you don't have the budget to have someone in your group, work with your internal audit department. They always do have someone who's good in that data analysis, and look at margins. Look at, the margins is always the big one. Look at, I know this sounds funny, but petty cash. If you still use petty cash in some of your organizations, it's a great way to bribe people. And I always said, if you can bribe someone out of petty cash, you're a cheap date. But it works, right? I mean, you'll be surprised how many of your businesses around the world still have petty cash and what they use it for. The other one is travel advances. One of the companies I used to work for, where we would go out to these vast desert areas to do installations, and there's no ATM machine. So what do? They give you a cash advance. What are they doing with that mega cash advance when they're traveling in these far reaches of the world? So I'm just giving you a couple, maybe I should think about this, or maybe I should talk to my internal audit department, is that the data analytics is to drive the red flags, and then you dig further. And then you can build the queries to just do it automatically for you. And that's what we're doing right now at Briggs. But I came from that history of doing that. And that's what that isn't what's going to sell your integrity program or your anti-bribery program. What it's going to do is help you block an issue before it becomes an issue.
Yeah, there's not that much I can add to what Sonny and Anne Marie have said. I agree with everything they've said. I mean, we use data analytics, and we call, or at least 10, 15 years ago, we called petty cash walking around money for sales reps. We try and identify high-risk areas around the world in terms of geography, in terms of our businesses. If we have a case or we have an internal investigation, we will look at that case, and then we will try and use data analytics to predict if we'll have that kind of a case somewhere else. We're always trying to get out ahead and prevent having a problem, and data analytics can help us do that. But I also agree with what Anne Marie says. I don't need to advertise data analytics. As I said, our management, our board, they're very aware of these compliance issues, these reputational issues. The pharmaceutical industry has never been under more scrutiny than it is right now for pricing. You can read it every day. So we're questioning everything we do internally. And so the data analytics and the monitoring and the risk assessments, that's all going on in the mechanisms of our compliance group. And we have lots of people who are really good at that, and they need to be, so that we can identify trends and prevent things before they happen.
Okay, thanks. I'd like to pose one more question before we open it up to the team or to the group. I'm a big fan of metrics, and many years ago, to build on what Sonny said, it wasn't an advertisement, but I heard a phrase: "You can't improve what you can't measure." And in this world of difficult decisions, finite resources, to go to the boss, whoever the boss might be, and say, "We need more money to do because we're more people, because we're not doing well," or "How well are we doing?" Any secret sauce, or any thoughts you can share with the group about how you can say that your program is improving, or how you can say your program's successful?
Sure. I can lead this one off. I'll do a shameless plug for Ethisphere, because we just did the benchmark, and we just finished it. We did not try to apply for world's most ethical companies. I didn't have the head count to be able to just compile some of the detailed information, but I did want the benchmark, which you can do without applying for WME. And I used that as my report card. When I was hired, the board said, "Okay, Anne Marie, how long is it going to take you to build this thing?" And they weren't saying it that way in a derogatory way. They were just curious. What's the timeline here? And I said, the first year's design, the second year's build, the third year's to make sure it's sustainable. And I said, if we were under deferred prosecution agreement, if we were lucky, we'd get that same 3-year threshold. Build, or design, build, measure for sustainability. Well, I'm just finishing up my 3 years. So I had to be able to demonstrate how are we doing. So I figured the best way is to have an outside benchmark tell me how are we doing. So we just finished it up, and in fact, I have my, this week I'm writing my board report to synthesize the report that I got. And what's nice is that Ethisphere spent 2 hours with me and my team to walk through the results and talk about this is what we're seeing in trending, et cetera. So it wasn't just a deck put in front of me. But now I can take that and the full deck I'm giving to our senior leadership team next week. And I gave it to our integrity steering committee, and we had a meeting earlier this week. The board will get a more executive summary, but that's our report card. How are we doing? So that's one, is you have an external firm do a benchmark of how you're doing. But you can't do that every year, or you might not want to do it every year. Maybe you do, and that's great. But another way that we do it informally is, I'm sure no matter what industry you are in, you have some peer networking association. For manufacturing, a lot of us belong to MAPI, which is the Manufacturers Allegiance for Productivity and Innovation, and they have different councils. They have an Ethics and Compliance Council. They meet twice a year, but I'm in the Midwest, and most of us come from southeastern Wisconsin, northern Illinois, and like the Michigan area, that big manufacturing belt. So we get together quarterly to talk about and share best practices, so I can benchmark myself against my peers in the same industry. Excuse me. The other way I benchmark is through our outside counsel, because they're working with other companies. And if we ever have an issue and they look at, well, what are you doing to avoid that issue or to identify that issue, they're the other benchmark. In fact, I just went through that with our outside counsel, and they said, can you provide us X, Y, and Z, your policies, your procedures, your et cetera, et cetera. And they looked at it and they said, you've done everything that you need to be doing in this situation. And so that's another great benchmark for you as your outside counsel. And I guess the last I would put on the metrics and the success is a lot of times we're focused on how did we help someone get a distributor assigned? Or how did we get that training done? Or how did we do this successfully? I want to know what went wrong. What were the rejected distributors? What were the ones who didn't finish our questionnaire, and why? And did we dodge a bullet? Right? I like talking to the business about dodging a bullet. And just one quick story. We had in one of our business units an opportunity to sell an amazing number of units into Venezuela. That's great. Wonderful opportunity. It was going to make our year in that one order in just one of our business units. But because it was such a large order and where it was going in the nature of the industry, I asked them to fill out our standard questionnaire ahead of time. What is it going to be used for? Where are the units? Is it going into anything that could be potentially sanctioned, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? They didn't fill out the questionnaire. And I said to the sales group, I'm sorry, if they're not going to fill out the questionnaire, I can't take this risk. And the CEO completely agreed. The senior VP of the business completely agreed. And then we went on. For a couple months, and then a couple months later, that particular company hit the front page of being involved in a scandal related to corruption and bribing to win bids. And it wasn't an I told you so, but people opened up their eyes and said, now I get it. Now I know why you have this questionnaire. It's not just an administrative burden. So I said we dodged a bullet. So you measure your successes, but you also measure where did you dodge the bullet, and I think that's helpful in measuring success.
Yeah, we, again, probably 90% of our employee base they're engineers, and they love to measure everything. And I'm a philosophy major. We don't measure anything. In fact, I tell them the difference between an engineer and a philosophy major. An engineer builds a bridge. A philosophy major comes along and wonders whether it really exists or not. I became general counsel about the same time that our CEO became the CEO. And in one of the first meetings that he had with his executive leadership team, he said, we have these 6 core values. We don't concentrate enough on them. Safety, of course, because of the kinds of work we do, is measured every 6 ways from Sunday, and we pay a lot of attention to it. We ought to pay the same attention to every core value that we've got as we do to safety, or it shouldn't be a core value. And so he started assigning core values to different executives, and I took on integrity, and he said, we need to find a way to measure it. We need metrics for it. So Sonny developed metrics for it. Well, I talked to a lot of people outside the company, and they say, yeah, you really should measure it. Nobody had an idea of how to measure it. With the help of our ethics committee, we finally did come up with metrics, both leading and lagging metrics. I think we've got 4 leading and 3 lagging metrics. And we use those a lot in sort of seeing how our employees are reacting to our programs. And it allows us to sometimes identify areas maybe within a company. If we're getting a lot of the same kind of reports with a particular geography within the company or a particular business unit, we say, hey, we need to do more training on this particular issue. Or if we're not getting any reports, if I've gotten maybe 2 or 3 reports from our Middle East group in a year, I go, well, something's wrong. They obviously don't understand the importance of this. We go out and we do additional training there as well. We also use outside counsel and talking to them about what some of their other clients are doing, because you can get that. I talk to people within our industry, of course, and everybody's very, very willing to share. But talking with outside counsel, since they have a wide variety of clients, you can find out what people outside your industry are doing. And it's rare that I don't come away from that or for meetings like this saying, hey, you know what, gee, why didn't we think of that? That's something that we can do. Also, I mentioned I send out these periodic reports on things that have happened with other companies and how they could have happened at Parsons. I start to get emails from employees telling me about things that they've read in the newspaper here or there that they've seen. So it's clear they're reacting to those kinds of messages as well. When you have them coming to you, not necessarily maybe with an ethics issue, but with something that they've read or something that they've seen or experienced outside of having to report a problem that they've got, then you know that they're getting the message.
Great, thank you. Tom, anything like that?
Just quickly, I'm much closer to Sonny. I'm more of a philosophy major on this kind of thing. Got a lot of mileage out of Hobbes, Locke, and Rousseau in college. But of course, as a pharmaceutical company, we have lots of metrics, and we have the equivalent of deferred prosecutions. We have a CIA, a corporate integrity agreement. We have an IRO, an institutional review officer. So metrics are applied to our business all the time. Some of the internal things that we do along these lines are our audit group has a program that they started recently or a couple of years ago where they promote internally, and this is kind of promoted internally at executive committees, every audit finding only once. So if they find a problem, we publicize it. We make sure every executive in every country and every corner of Novartis knows what happened in this audit in this country, and we don't want it to happen again. So we want the executives who are running the countries and running the various businesses to understand what we've found in our audits and in our other metrics, and learn from that and make sure that it doesn't happen in their business. And in terms of outside counsel, this is something that we do a lot. We have scientists who are obviously quite inventive, and they're finding new ways or new medicines to help patients. But we have very inventive marketing people as well. And whenever we're presented with a new idea, even if we're involved early in the process, it's always good to call outside counsel because they have an advantage that we don't have. They're talking to other companies, and their marketing people in those other companies are bringing similar, unique and imaginative marketing ideas and sales ideas, and they're being bounced off some of these outside counsel. So I tell my lawyers, I'd rather consult for an hour with 3 or 4 outside counsel than get it wrong and have to litigate that issue 3 years from now because we didn't get it right when we first were confronted with this marketing program. So outside counsel is a really good benchmarking tool, and other consultants too, compliance consultants, accounting firms. They all are giving advice to pharmaceutical companies, and they all have views on the kinds of things that we're being presented with in-house, and they can be very helpful in analyzing those risks.
Great.
I'm sorry, can I just add one thing? Just because all 3 of us have talked about outside counsel, I can see in your mind you might be thinking dollar signs, right? One of our outside counsel in Milwaukee has, it's ingenious, actually, because they're doing it slightly as a marketing and best practice sharing, but they've done their own roundtable. So 3 times a year, they get together their clients, talk about certain topics, and they ask their clients to come up with the topics. So we get together from about 8 o'clock till 9:30 in the morning in one of their conference rooms, and we talk about that topic 3 times a year. There is no fee for that. That is building relationships with their clients. It's the clients building relationships with each other. So if you're fearful that every time you pick up the phone to your counsel, the meter clicks, maybe ask them if they want to do some of these roundtables every so often, and then the meter doesn't click as much.
Yeah, I was going to say as well, talking about outside counsel, we don't pay retail for anything anymore with outside counsel. And a lot of times in driving the bargains that we do with our outside counsel, we require them to give us a set number of free hours per year. And you can use these kinds of things, those free hours for these kinds of things. And there's so much free information out there now. Anyway, not only from law firms, but there are a number of different people that blog about corruption and compliance things. Some of them are good, some of them aren't, but I subscribe to a lot of them. If you just spend a little time searching the internet, you can get a lot of free information that's helpful in doing this kind of thing.
Great. Thank you. Let's, the last few minutes, open up to questions anyone might have. Please.
Curious about how you guys feel about the sort of 2 new standards that were arguably supposed to be a huge deal, and then it's been questionable whether or not they're really any different than the standards that are already out there. So first, the ISO standard, the 37001, that's specific to anti-corruption management. And then secondly, the more recent kind of poof, it's on the DOJ website, out of nowhere article that presumably Wei Chen weighed in on, which gives a number of factors that in-house compliance teams should be considering when building out their program. I think the second one from the DOJ is usually viewed as more important, but I'm curious, as to how you guys feel about these things, how you react to them, if you give yourself, I don't know, a measuring stick with these kinds of documents that come out, or whether it just frankly just feels like a little bit more of the same, maybe summarized in a different way.
I think the DOJ article is sort of more of the same, coming out a different way. I don't think there was anything really new in there. The DOJ is constantly saying, well, we're not going to tell you exactly what the steps are that will get you off the hook, but they keep giving you hints. And these are some of those hints. And so, I looked at it, it was maybe said a little bit different way. To me, it didn't seem like it was any real new information, but it's more confirmation, I think, of things you want to do, and gives you another opportunity to look back at your program and say, well, maybe they're talking about it in a different way. Let me take a look at my program and see if it meets that. With the ISO standard, I was very hopeful when that was announced that it was going to be coming out. I'm not so sure about it now. We were definitely going to apply, and we haven't made a decision now as to whether in fact we are or not.
I'll echo the comments on the DOJ. I think it was a restatement of what they issued in November of 2012 of the hallmarks. If you put them side by side, you can draw an arrow to each one. But to your point, Sonny, is that it was a reaffirmation of, oh, don't forget what we told you, 4.5 years ago, right? So for that part, I wasn't going to recreate the wheel based on that. Now in the ISO, we haven't made any steps to go forward to get that certification, and that was actually a topic of our MAPI roundtable. What month are we in? We're in March, last month. And of the peer group, and there are probably about 10 companies represented, very large organizations, no one is taking those first couple steps forward. They're looking at it, they're analyzing it, but no one's really going forward, and I think there's only one company to date that's actually gone through the process. So I think it's some of us are doing a wait and see right now.
Another question? Okay, I think we're about 3 minutes early, so you'll get a little bit of extra time. I want to thank you all for attending and thank our panelists for traveling and for their insight. Thank you.